In the last episode, Lin finally kills the soul-devouring insect king, bringing him under his command. Venturing deeper into the secret realm, he encountered the world boss. However, he struggled against the 4 layers of barriers set up by the guards. But he might have just figured out a way to counter it. As we continue the story, the soul flames successfully break through the barrier, and a spark lands on one of the guards, causing it to scream in agony. Its screams shook the entire protective barrier, creating a small opening. Lin didn't waste this opportunity. Under the command of the undead general, the skeletal army launched an attack. The skeletal mages waved their staffs, and 4 different elemental attacks rained down on the flame-scorched guard. Without missing a beat, Lin raised his hand and followed up with Bone Spike for the final strike. The guard's body was pierced, and a system message informed Lin of the kill. Lin smiled as a red glow appeared in his hand, his favorite skill, corpse explosion. The guard's body expanded instantly and then exploded. The powerful blast reverberated through the cavern, killing the remaining 3 guards along the way. The queen shrieked in pain, slightly injured but not enough to bring her down. "My soldiers, the time to counterattack has come," Lin commanded, and the legion of skeletal warriors surged forward. With the guards dead, the protective barrier vanished. The skeletal warriors swung their swords and charged. They climbed onto the queen's body, causing her to tremble. Out of desperation, she used a skill, Super Hatch. Perhaps realizing what she was trying to do, Lin shifted his focus to the scattered eggs around the cavern, which soon began to hatch. The eggs underwent some changes, and within moments, hundreds of soul-devourer insects flew out. However, the queen likely didn't realize, the more insects there were, the faster she would die. In just a few seconds, nearly 100 powerful and massive soul-devourer insects had spawned. The queen started panting heavily. It was clear that the recent skill had drained a lot of her spirit. The soul-devourer insects shook off the fluid on their bodies and charged at the skeletal army. These insects were much larger than the ones Lin had encountered before. Without wasting any time, he immediately used Bone Spike, thinking it was a good thing since he needed corpses anyway. The spikes knocked the insects back, while the queen used her skill to fling the skeletal warriors off her. The attack had a massive range, but the skeletal armor managed to block the queen's attack. Seeing the struggling queen, Lin knew it was time to finish her once and for all. He first used a slow curse, immobilizing the airborne insects. The skeletal warriors leaped high in the air, using their rampage strike, quickly killing several of them. Their bodies fell from the sky and were grabbed by the skeletal warriors, who then threw them back at the queen. He repeated the process several more times. In mere moments, he followed up with corpse explosion. The explosions echoed one after another, and every single giant soul-devourer insect hatched from her own skill became a death sentence for the queen. The entire cavern echoed with continuous explosions. A few minutes later, the queen collapsed to the ground. The system notified him of the kill, awarding him 5.1 million experience points. He also received 1 soul-devourer egg, 10 soul crystals, and a soul gem. The soul-devourer eggs could be given to a beast tamer to hatch a new queen. The soul gem could increase spirit recovery speed 10-fold. Reading the descriptions, he was very pleased with his loot. While he might not need the egg, he could sell it for a very decent price, and the soul gem was exactly what he needed. Remembering what White Divine had said about the boundless opportunities in the eternal trial ground, it was no surprise that he had already gained so much amazing loot in such a short time. Joy filled him as he let out a smile. However, he had no clue that his defeat of the queen had triggered a great change in the eternal trial ground. Outside, countless people looked up at the sky. There were several streams of light in the sky, resembling an aurora. Many human professionals knew this change occurred when a world boss was defeated, but they had no idea who had done it. Of course, our boy was oblivious to what was happening outside. Minutes after the death of the soul-devourer queen, its body gradually disappeared. From within the fading remains, something emerged and floated before him. Lin picked it up, realizing it was a primordial rune, a credential for entering the primordial space. Lin suddenly recalled White Divine mentioning that this was the greatest opportunity in the eternal trial ground. It was the foundation that allowed him to become a divine-level professional in the first place. If White Divine hadn't entered the primordial space back then, he might never have become a divine-level professional. Lin was told that the detection spell they were using was originally obtained from there, This proves just how incredible the primordial space really is. Lin never imagined he would find this rune here. Suddenly, the rune in his hand began to tremble. It transformed into countless incomprehensible characters that, accompanied by red light, entered his body. Then, a beam of light shot from his body straight into the sky. Outside, other professionals saw this beam and realized someone had obtained the primordial rune. This meant that for the next 10 days until the light faded, the person would be pursued by countless enemies trying to kill him and seize the rune. But who had obtained it? Lin hadn't expected the rune to activate immediately. A little surprised, perhaps his teacher had endured the same thing back in his day. Now, it was his turn. Suddenly, a dagger appeared behind him, flying toward him fiercely. With a soft thud, the skeletal armor glowed and blocked the sneak attack. Lin quickly turned around, and without hesitation, cast a slow curse behind him. The attacker, now revealed, was a dragon assassin. A few nearby skeletal warriors quickly switched targets and slashed at him, but dragons have a natural resistance to curses, significantly weakening the slow curse's effect. The assassin promptly retreated, dodging the skeletal warrior's attacks. Lin predicted the assassin's landing spot and swiftly used Bone Spike. The assassin couldn't evade in time and was pierced by several spikes, but wasn't immediately killed. Just then, a healing spell illuminated the assassin's body, signaling the arrival of his teammates. Angrily, he shouted for them to attack together. The red glow surrounding Lin was very conspicuous, and they were obviously here to steal the primordial rune from him. Lin knew this glow would last for 10 whole days, and the dragon professionals in front of him were all above level 40, their eyes gleaming with greed. Thinking of this, Lin smiled, thinking to himself, if that's the case, I'll just kill every single one of them. In the next second, he summoned his legion of skeletons all at once. Skeletons filled the cavern in an instant. The undead general raised his scepter and cast legion enhancement. Skeletal warriors brandished their swords, and skeletal mages raised their staffs. The dragon professionals were shocked. How could there be so many skeletons? Before they knew what was happening, spells surged like a tidal wave as 4 types of elemental attacks fell onto them. The leading knight roared and activated group protection. Lin smirked. Compared to the queen's protective barrier, this was nothing. Sure enough, the barrier shattered upon impact. They quickly landed, dodging the rest of the attacks. The knight didn't hesitate, immediately using group taunt, limitless defense, and firepower attraction, an advanced skill that redirects all enemy ranged attacks to the user. The taunt skill also redirected the skeletal warriors, previously charging at his teammates, now toward him. The mage in the dragon professional party slammed his staff into the ground, casting the skill Avalanche. The ground beneath the skeletons erupted, creating several deep pits that many skeletal warriors fell into. The lead knight, now battered and bruised, knew they needed to get out of there immediately. He turned and shouted to his teammates, "Run!" But Lin had no intention of letting them escape. He summoned his scythe and sneered, "Leaving? After that assassination attempt?" He then retrieved a couple soul crystals from his storage space, absorbed its contents, and soon enough, he increased several thousand spirit points. With more than enough spirit points, he used Soul Summon to call forth the Insect King. In a panic, the dragon professionals ran for their lives, feeling a powerful aura behind them. When they turned and saw the Insect King, they couldn't believe their eyes. They quickened their pace, desperately running towards the entrance, but their speed was no match for the Insect King. In a flash, it appeared behind them, grabbing the slowest dragon. "Let me go! Let me go!" he shouted, punching futilely as he was lifted and fed into the Insect King's maw. The sight of their teammate's half-eaten body froze the others in horror. With a piercing scream, the Insect King used his skill. Instantly, the other dragon's eyes glowed blue, and they screamed in agony. The Insect King opened its mouth again and devoured them one after another. Watching from a distance, Lin observed the gruesome scene, but it seemed the Insect King was more than enough to deal with this small squad. After the entire team was annihilated, Lin leveled up to 7-star lieutenant. The Insect King was then recalled into the scythe. Despite the bloody aftermath and the red glow around him, he felt a bit of excitement, thinking the next 10 days might be quite interesting. Suddenly, he heard footsteps and a shout from behind. "Junior brother!" He turned to see a group of heavily armed human professionals sprinting toward him, panting and seemingly in a hurry. However, Lin remembered White Divine's warning that in the eternal trial ground, people might turn on their own kind for the sake of profit. He didn't lower his guard and carefully scrutinized them,